Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the full moon forecast. Aquarius sun, Aquarius rising, Aquarius moon, folks. Anybody with strong Aquarius, this forecast is going to have something for you, but we are going to look at the Aquarius rising chart as we look at the full moon in the sign of Aquarius. That's on Tuesday, August 1st, and the main astrological themes that are going to be present throughout the next 2 weeks leading up to our next new moon, which is going to be in Leo. So we're going to talk a lot about Leo today, strangely enough, Aquarius, because without understanding the diametric opposition of any of these signs, you really just don't understand yourself if you are a sun, moon, or rising sign in Aquarius. So we are going to talk about, some Leo stuff. We're going to talk about where the sun is currently as I'm recording this, which is the 29th. It's the Saturday 29th. So the sun is conjunct the beehive cluster. It's a cluster of stars, very similar to how the Pleiades are a cluster of stars. It's in the constellation of Cancer, which is where our last new moon was, not in the constellation, but in the zodiac degree of Cancer. So we're going to talk about that beehive cluster a little bit because it's in Leo. Of course, there is strong Leo still, but Mercury is now moved into, as of this recording, has moved into Virgo. So, geez, our minds have something to actually do now, right? As opposed to when it was in Leo, it was just such a bold and confident, and there's nothing wrong with that, but also it's very motivational. But Mercury is now at home in Virgo. It's like, all right, it's time to actually crunch the numbers, which is what our mind really wants to do, get to work, organizing and being meticulous. And like I said, analyzing. The thing about Virgo is that you use your intuition and your analysis in order to be able to discriminate or to have discernment about where things end and other things begin. So it's a lot under the surface with Mercury in Virgo. Mars is in Virgo. And in fact, on the day of this full moon, there's this really strong connection to Mars is in a trine to Jupiter, and Mercury is in its first real challenge while in Virgo. Its first real aspect, actually, while in Virgo, which is an opposition to Saturn. So we're going to talk about that pretty heavily because it's happening on the day of the full moon. So full disclosure, I am an Aquarius rising, so this is a very personal reading for me, and I would imagine that many of us have already been feeling the growing and illuminating revelation that's coming with the full moon in Aquarius. And I've talked a lot about this already, and it does feel like that especially with the rising sign, is that being very sensitive to the experience of discovering the reality of ourselves and where we've projected some sort of ideal situation onto a person, onto another situation, right? Onto ourselves. Maybe others have projected onto ourselves. Whatever the case may be, even though it appears that the sun in Leo will be kind of like the morning coming and the dew rising or developing on the grass, and this kind of moment of like, oh, I made it through, and a lot of confidence around that. It also is going to reveal the situation as it is, right? And so for the Aquarius people, there's a strong likelihood that we can very gracefully, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, certainly in the true Aquarius kind of like detached and aloof fashion, be like, oh, I see that there's a difference between the celebrity and the actual person that exists on a day-to-day basis, right? That's the sole sovereignty of that individual versus the celebrity or the popularity that is projected. So whatever the case is, yes, there'll be a sensitivity to it, but again, in true Aquarian fashion, the capacity to be aloof and emotionally detached in some ways allows a much easy, I don't want to say an easier time, but it has the potential to be less emotionally impactful than it could be when you're just like, oh, I realize now that I was projecting all this idealism into this situation or myself, and now I'm like, oh, okay, I feel that, I intuitively see that, and I am ready to let these things go in order to really express myself through my own individuality. And that's the danger of Aquarius as a whole. And there's going to be a lot of transits that are involving Uranus during this next 2 weeks. In particular, Venus is going to come around for her second square with Uranus, and right before the Leo moon, the Leo sun is going to square Uranus right at the balsamic moon. So Uranus as the ruling planet of Aquarius, Uranus as the the Stargate, or the wormhole, if you want to think about it that way, the quantum gateway that we walk through, which is usually so mind-bending that you have no choice but to either adapt or assimilate. And again, that's the danger with Aquarius. Without a sense of actual soul sovereignty, where your heart really resides, what your heart fire is, what your passions are, what is truly you and your voice, it's really easy to get caught up in the Borg. It really is, into the network. And so Aquarius people, there's a value to being attached and aloof emotionally, because you are the water bearer. You're the holder. We are the holders of the container of the spirit in many ways. And Aquarius people have this, capacity at intellectual level in order to open that third eye, or be able to manage that experience of the Kundalini kind of coming up and opening that without getting caught up in the network, right? But that's the danger of it. You have to know where your fire is, right? What lives in your heart that inspires you, that is more than yourself. And thankfully for me, I have my own value system, and identified Jesus as my talisman a while ago. So I know where my sovereignty comes from. So I think it's really important that Aquarius people are very honest with themselves and very clear with whatever it is. It doesn't have to be related to anything, to a specific religion or a belief system, right? But it has to be something, I would say it has to be something that inspires a joyful, or at the very least authentic expression, right? In order not to kind of get sucked into the Borg. So we're going to talk about some pitfalls that are involved in the Leo energy in particular as well, right? So what are the negative aspects of Leo and the fifth house and the sun, which rules Leo? So it's really, really extra strong. Well, it could be narcissism. It could be just being more egocentric, very self-centered, right? These are all because it's about the heart, right? And the heart is the only one, and it is the center of the experience. And when we put ourselves out there, we experience being the center of a situation, because we're being authentic with ourselves in our expression, whatever it is, right? Your sense of who you are kind of burns up in the combustion of your creativity being released. And that's why you can, especially Aquarius people, can so very easily kind of blend, not even blend, but be one and the same with the network of humans, of our voice, right, coming together. But again, there are pitfalls, and we're going to talk about that. So one announcement that I'd like to make before I really get into the essence of this is some of you, there's a cross-section of people here who are part of the Starseed Fellowship, who are part of the monthly subscriber base, and so you already know this, that there is a likelihood, that the Starseed ministry is going to go on hiatus just for a little while, and I'm not sure exactly in what capacity it's going to come back, but I do want it to come back. But for those of you who were maybe wondering, if you have been watching, but you're not a monthly subscriber through Subscribestar, so you didn't really know what was going on, it's going on hiatus for just a little while, and these reports in particular are going to continue. The new and full moon reports, I love doing them. I think it's a really great way to reach a lot of people in terms of astrology. Truth be told, they get more traction anyway than the Starseed ministry, but it's going on hiatus. It just needs some time, and I need some time because I'm about to go back into the outside workforce even more. So, and another reason why Aquarius people really have to be tapped into what is their passion, right? Because that's what, that heart fire is what moves through you and keeps you motivated when other things are attempting to squeeze you, pressurize you, depress you, whatever it is. And so in order to be part of the collective in a completely aware and conscious state, you have to know what it is you're doing that drives you in that way. So you can see why this is kind of a personal reading for me, because something significant is about to change in my life in terms of where my energy is focused. But these new and full moons still going to be out. And of course, the Starseed Ministry or Starseed Fellowship people, the monthly subscribers, that's not changing at all. The Catalyst Classroom's not changing. None of that is changing. So, but in terms of like a weekly stream, I'm not sure when it's going to come back. So hopefully, I'd say in September, it'll find a much different but equally beneficial, landing pad, basically. It might just not be every week, or a different day. It's possible. Maybe I'll do it monthly. I'm not sure. I just wanted to let you know, just so that everybody's on the same page who cares to know. And if you don't, and this is the first time you're watching any of this content, then don't worry about it. You're not missing much. Although I would also recommend going back and checking out the previous live streams, because there's still a lot of good content in there. So, all right, let's get into this broadcast, shall we? This Aquarius full moon report. So, I just want to give an overview of the main transits that are going to be happening in the next 2 weeks. So, of course, a full moon is another beginning point, but it's a beginning in full consciousness, whereas the new moon is a beginning, but it's in unconsciousness. And so just like the seed is implanted in the soil and it just seems like it's inert, but all of these experiences are happening on the inside of the seed that is encouraging it, getting it ready to germinate, basically, and then push up through the soil. That's what a new moon is, right? It's you're setting the intention, you're planting the seed, and you are essentially reacting based on more primal and instinctual urges that are pushing all of us through this experience. And then you get more into the crescent moon and the waxing moon and the first quarter, and you start to individualize. You start to become cognizant and aware of the resistance and the obstacles. And the full moon is where the full culmination of the solar power is revealed to the living soul, and we are essentially in a position where we become aware of it, we embody it, and we embrace it. We become one with it, as a personalized being here. And then from there, the light of the moon is going to start fading based on the position of the lunar cycle where we're at, and it's up to us as fully conscious beings from the light of the full moon to keep that fire alive in some way, as the solar energy is finishing up the cycle, right? It's going back into its yin phase, and just because something is going back into its yin phase, much like seasonally with the sun, we're going back into the yin phase as well. That's what happens at the solstice in June, is that the northern hemisphere is at peak and the southern hemisphere is at its lowest, and then we are switching positions. So we're going into the yin part of the year up here in the northern hemisphere. So the same thing with the lunar cycle. It's just a much more it's just a tighter circle, so it just moves faster, just like the orbit of Mercury around the sun goes a lot faster in relation to the orbit of Pluto around the sun. So we're now coming into a new beginning with the full light of consciousness, embraced and embodied by our living soul. So now we have to take this realization, and for the Aquarius people, in terms of identity and in terms of full expression of ourselves, and really be honest with what it is that has been a projection of something that has been ephemeral and more idealistic, and what is the reality. And it's from here that we're going to start, interfacing with that revelation as, in a way that we have to consciously accept it. We can't just react to more those instinctual changes necessarily anymore. So the first, and I've talked about this before, but the day of the full moon, which is again on Tuesday, August 1st here, is there's Mars trine Jupiter. As you can see here, Mars is in Virgo, and Jupiter is in Taurus. So there's this Earth trine. And then Mercury, now freshly in Virgo as of today. It's the 29th that I'm recording this. And we're going to talk about where the sun is right now, which is in conjunction with the Beehive cluster, which is a star cluster in the constellation of Cancer. And this is a really... I discovered the potency of this particular starseed marking, I'd say probably about 9 months ago, started to really, and I just figured it out on my own. It wasn't anything that was presented to me. I started doing research and be like, there's something really important about this degree, and it's really hitting starseeds really significantly. And then I started to do some more research, and I will share with you what I've come to, at least when we get there. But Mercury is also moved into Virgo and is ready to actually go to work, like crunch the numbers, analyze the data, using our intuition as well. That's the thing about Virgo. It's just not the mind. You use your intuition to truly discern. And Mercury is at home in Virgo. It is happy to be here. Let's get to work. Let's start crunching the numbers. Let's start actually organizing the data. Let's start analyzing it, right? That's where, that's the Virgo part of the scientific method comes in, is the analysis of your observational data. So Mars has been trying to just like act on this somehow, and it's been like the engine has really, that furnace is like really active, and there's processes going on under the surface of the soil, so to speak, right? Because Virgo is an earth sign. But Mercury is now ready to put toward that intelligence and like that actual data acquisition, really analyzing the numbers. Whereas Mars has just been acting on instinct in this area, but this is where our intuition can really be honed, is like just following and practicing following your instincts. Ooh, that's an interesting connection I hadn't made till just now. So anyway, Mercury is here, and I suspect that all of us are going to start putting our mental energy into this analysis mode and really putting things where they belong and using our mind and our intelligence to actually do it. So, but following our instinct with Mars here this whole time has been very useful. So the trine to Jupiter, as this full moon is happening for the Aquarius people, that is like revealing this aspect of self that has either been over idealized, that is fading away, or also too of how this has been projected out onto situations. So if you're a moon or Aquarius, if you're a moon or a sun Aquarius, knowing what your rising sign is probably going to give you a better indication of what area of life this is really being projected onto. But for the rising sign people, this is definitely in the projection of self, how you are emotionally responding to this information, how you are intuitively engaged with the fading away of the ephemeral popularity of a person, a situation, something ideal. And it's about relationship for the Aquarius rising person. All this Leo energy in the 7th house has just been, you become that Leo person in relationship. It's not an easy position to have an Aquarius rising. And I'd say even Aquarius sun, because the sun is at its detriment in Aquarius. So that too. But it also kind of turns people into more, it functions in a way that kind of keeps the Aquarius sun person from really just getting too caught up in ego. Gets a very sustained and vitalized expression through the works of humanity as a whole, and through working in that ideal way. So I mean, I have lots of Aquarius sun people in my life that are just remarkable and wonderful people. And they really do care about humanity, and they really find their joy in serving humanity. So it's just, when you're an Aquarius rising person, and what I have found in my own personal experience is that you are definitely the star of the show when you're in relationship, because your capacity to just like tap into the network of whatever network you're in just leads that. So I feel like there's been a lot of challenge around this, and now that Venus is retrograde, I think that there's been a lot of for the Aquarius people, a lot of reevaluation of role in relationship and the value of that. There's been a lot of real deep reconsideration, it feels like. So, but then the sun is here and you're just like, yeah, but I want to be in these relationships. And Venus is like, are you sure? Like, how does this really feel? Like in your feels, like not in your emotional feels. What are you sensing? Like, what are you picking up on? Because Venus truly does rule the seventh house because she rules Libra. So she's already, very familiar with being Lady Justice here. And she's like, just because you want this and you feel personally sustained by these, doesn't mean that this is, what are you actually feeling? And so there's much more of a pulling in and reevaluation of these situations that has been happening. So, of course, Mercury is there to be a little bit more objective now, where Mars in the 8th house is just been very forceful in terms of the shared resource realm. So I'm glad that for my own sake, that Mercury is now here to be more objective and be the shepherd to go into the underworld that no other energy is able to really do, except for Hermes or Thoth or Mercury, right? This is the energy that is able to shepherd the souls to the underworld and come back. Mercury was the only, and Hermes was the only one, right? Thoth, the wisdom comes from the knowledge. So, and Mercury rules the knowledge, and Mercury rules the service, right? When we are focused on being of service with that knowledge and not getting pulled into things, not getting pulled, especially with all this Draco energy. And Mercury is going to meet Alpha Draconis soon enough, like right after this full moon. So this is good that it's opposite Saturn at the same time. So Mars here has been very forceful, has been very direct, wants to arouse like some sort of group, whatever, and again, acting on instinct, which is not always accurate, and in the 8th house is really has got a drive here in terms of shared resources, but is not really thinking about it. So Mercury is now going to be using some thinking and some rationality here along with the intuition in the area that is really difficult to maintain any semblance of balance here in the 8th house, because this is where the darkness is, in your own darkness, right? Without really becoming honest with yourself, Aquarius, and what you've projected, what's been projected onto you, how that has affected you in relationship. Without an understanding of that, it's, what is generated in terms of shared resources is not all, that is directly impacted by who you are in relationship and the nature of your relationship. So there's a lot more now of that mental objectivity. So don't be fooled though. Mercury opposite Saturn is going to keep you in line, right? Keep all of us in line, right? About what your resources actually are and your responsibility towards using them in a way with integrity, and not necessarily getting caught up in the accolades that you may or may not get from that, but not to get too forceful about trying to make something happen, to, you want to activate and arouse those that you're in association with, who you do business with, who you're in a sexual relationship with, who you're in some sort of ritualistic setting. And I'm not condoning or condemning that. It's just telling you that the 8th house is where this shit happens. So Mars has got the drive and the instinct and the initiative, and now Mercury's here to be like, okay, let's actually think rationally about this. But if you're too rational, if you are not connected to your empathy, which Saturn in Pisces is basically like, you have to be, your conscience is here, right? There's going to be some serious conversations that are coming out and some serious consideration of power dynamics with Mercury opposite Saturn like this. But Mars trine Jupiter, this is very interesting because Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus, this is the 4th house of your inner power. This is your 4th house of your home and your family, personal and private life, your intuitive senses in the 4th house. Jupiter and Mars in a trine is one of the best indicators of successful effort. Even if you even if it's not totally above board, if you initiate something, that has to do with winning, it's gonna you're probably going to be successful even if you are not fully, like I said, above board. It's still going to happen. But if you are acting in a way that's considerate and aware of, and your empathy is intact, I feel like that this is going to, it's even that much more beneficial, right? Applying energy towards like a righteous cause is going to bring the benefits you actually want with Mars trine Jupiter. And where's Jupiter? It's in Taurus, being like, there's a natural emergence here. You can't just divorce yourself. You can, but Taurus is fixed earth. It just was what is the nature of nature. And so as we are each individualizing into our own unique being, and with a consciousness, with a nervous system, with a sense of authenticity, we're still emerging out of our more unconscious drives and a sense of connection to the whole, while, because you're still embedded in the soil. That's what Taurus represents. So Jupiter here, again, is just holding the space in a lot of ways and providing a broad understanding and a wisdom to being aligned with this natural progression. So Taurus representing the living soil, the medium of growth. We're talking about your biofield as is. We're talking about your all your body and its natural value and inherent worth. Natural telluric energy. This is also covered, I think, under Taurus and the second house. So Jupiter is just the wisdom of that as a whole, right? And the wisdom and true alchemical power, I'd say, being that Jupiter rules that Sagittarius energy, and management of this process of natural emergence, right? And the Sabian symbol of 14 Taurus is like little kids playing on the beach next to the water, and then all these little crayfish that are like, coming out of the water, but they're also getting brought back into the water from the waves, right? And so and oftentimes you will see like the moon card in the tarot, or any type of connection to the moon. And of course, you're talking about shellfish or crabs or lobster. This is the Cancer archetype, which is ruled by the moon. And Taurus has a strong connection to the moon. It's exalted in Taurus. There's something, because the moon is also very, I don't want to say terrestrial. That's not the right word. It has a materiality, even if it's a ball of plasma, right? I'm not necessarily entirely convinced that it's just a holographic projection. I do think that there is a materiality to the moon. I just don't necessarily believe at this point that it's the way that mainstream astronomy has presented it to us, right? I think it's most likely a ball of plasma that then is reflecting something else. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just explaining to you that the moon is also exalted in Taurus because there's a connection to the nature of nature, right? The physicality. So anyway, I'm getting kind of off here because I just love talking about this stuff. Mars in a trine to Jupiter, and Jupiter is where? In the fourth house, your most intimate relationships, where your power is coming from. So Aquarius, realize that your true power stems from the actual natural telluric energy, from your actual connection to the earth, right? Not necessarily the world, but the earth, right? To nature. And Aquarius people would do well to remember that this is where the power and the root system comes from, is the physicality of. And I know that's hard, right? When you're an Aquarius person, like, you are living in your third eye and beyond, right? You are in simultaneously, like, moving through time, like, you are easily able to access those higher realms of awareness. And it is essential for Aquarius rising people in particular to just identify how important being grounded actually is. It really just comes down to that. So yes, Jupiter is like kind of holding the big picture, managing this. And so having that applied to Mars, it's like, yeah, let's get deeper, let's get closer, and the drive and the initiative to really arouse people that you're in business with, that you are in relationship with, because you have this sense of where your power is really coming from, and a wisdom that then can be directed and initiated with with Mars here, right? Now, the Mercury, and this is all still on Tuesday, the full moon, Aquarius. So Mercury is opposite Saturn. So when you have this type of opposition, just in general, taking away the houses that they're at, which is about power, right? Second and eighth house about power dynamics, right? Inherent power, resource, and value versus returns on investments, how you do business, right? The more than the sum of our parts when we come together and cooperate, right? The energy of sexuality is very potent and very real and is generated in the eighth house, right? And this is also where the shadow of who you are is integrated into your experience and you come out as the Phoenix rising, right? That's the ninth house, which is what Jupiter kind of rules, right? So Jupiter is ruling much more of this natural development in terms of yourself emerging. So Mercury opposite Saturn, though. Now, and keep in mind that we're getting very close to Mercury's conjunction with Alpha Draconis. And Saturn is conjunct Alpha Cygni, or Alpha Cygnus, right? So it is now activating the Cygnus starseeds, where Saturn is right now. So when these two are in opposition to each other, oh, where did my... That's so funny. I don't know where my notes just went for this particular transit. Stand by. Okay, so when you have Mercury opposite Saturn, it brings serious thinking, conversation. I think it can bring some negativity and sadness. And with the Saturn retrograde, I feel like it's even more of just like, no matter, you can't think your way necessarily entirely out of this. There is a sense of responsibility to how you're using your resources, okay? Because that's where Pisces is for the Aquarius rising, is the second house. So there can be communication difficulties, there's isolation, there's a sense of really kind of pulling back into what is your resource and not being necessarily able to... There could be some self-esteem issues that make it difficult to be purely objective in that realm. And I would say, again, it kind of pulls the awareness back into a sense of social responsibility in the way that resources are actually used. And perhaps Saturn is limiting how it can, these resources can be utilized in a way that you actually wouldn't want them to be, but you don't know any better because you don't have that anchor into your own conscience, and that's what Saturn really seems to be doing right now. So, ways to work with a Mercury opposite Saturn is to kind of do research on your own, instead of, and you know what I mean? Like, take that energy and really invest it into not being necessarily social, but really doing the studying. And I would say, again, with the full moon illuminating and making it very personal to the Aquarius person, where these, rose-colored glasses may have been, or the way we've projected idealism onto ourselves or other people, there may be kind of a sadness or a negativity and some poor communications and isolation here, just added to the emotional experience. So now again, Aquarius people, and by the way, Saturn also rules the sign of Aquarius. So this is also something where I feel like the Aquarius person can very easily just like turn that switch and be like, okay, whatever, I'm going to just go. I'm not going to feel anything about this right now, and I'm going to have this very kind of Spock mentality, right? So there's a possibility of bad news or very challenging situations arising. I would say the full moon is, again, likely to reveal some of these situations or reveal something. It may not be bad news. What the bad news, it's not so much the bad news, but how the mind will want to utilize itself in the presence of the bad news. If you have been neglectful in some way earlier, it's more likely to be challenging. So Aquarius, I think if you've been feeling, having challenging situations already that have been bringing some of this to light, I would say that you're way ahead of the curve. But if you haven't been dealing with it or kind of like really bypassing it, I would say that Mercury opposite Saturn is going to force it right in front of your face. So but you will, it's also likely that you're going to see the worst in every situation. But again, I have a feeling that that's just more a matter of mood, as opposed to it being real. And you don't have to make any important decisions. In fact, I would say with the full moon, you still have like a number of days of just being and basking in the full moon. So instead of making important decisions about relationships or signing contracts or making investments, you just kind of, use that energy, what Mercury and Virgo wants to do, which is at least use that objective approach to the way that you feel emotionally. Maybe just put it towards something instead of having it be used against you. And again, Saturn, as much as it's a pain in the ass, and we all have our moments with Saturn of just like, you're the overbearing dad that won't let me do anything, realize that in an ideal situation, the paternal energy is providing for more than just like the whims of your ego at every given moment. And that's the job of that role. And that's what Saturn, at least in terms of the astrology and the frequency coming from Saturn, really is meant to do. Yeah, it's led in many ways, but sometimes we need that structure in order to feel safe enough to just be ourselves, right? And that also comes with the opposition to Saturn and Capricorn, which is Cancer, right? Oh yeah, Cancer. That was where the new moon started for the Aquarius people in their 6th house, right? The hardest house for everyone. Where do you get your shit together? Well, the Aquarius people gets their shit together by not being a robot, but creating a semi-permeable membrane in terms of their service, their works, and their labors, so that they can be nurturing, but also protective. So, how's that been going, Aquarius? I'm just curious how that's been going. I could certainly relate to that in many ways. So, this is just the full moon. And as we go on from the full moon, the moon will move through Aquarius and move through Pisces, like it does for all of these full moons, where the experience at a personal level with the transits of the moon are going to be in the areas of individual identity and expression. So something is revealed about the individual, the personalized, intuitive experience, the subjective personality, whatever it is, and then we continue to have a personalized experience with the areas of what is ours, right? The areas of learning and the areas of rooting ourselves and personality integration. That's the 4th house. And granted, our ruling planet is in the 4th house right now. So even with the shifting landscape in the places where our groundedness comes from, this is just like constantly giving us an opportunity to be grounded and connected to source. Grounded and connected to source. Like we really can be, grounded and simultaneously in the most, the highest realm of consciousness, if you want, our connection to source, basically. So, and to God. So as much as it's been a pain in the ass here with Uranus in the 4th house, it's been, I feel like it's been kind of necessary, right, to get the Aquarius people to kind of snap out of the transhumanist Borg mentality here and get back into grounded here in this on Earth, right? Because we need to be here, right? Otherwise, we're just going to be pulled into the hive, and that's not going to fulfill. It's not going to fulfill anything. So, well, it certainly will for some people, but. Come on, Starseeds, let's not let ourselves be completely siphoned out of our experience, shall we? So, the next big transit as the moon is moving through Aquarius, it's moving through Pisces, it's going to move through all of those it's going to move through the 1st and 2nd house without much in the way of major transits. It's not until the moon gets to Aries and the 3rd house so there's going to be some time, Aquarius, for us to really integrate this full moon, like really let the dust settle. So maybe use that Mercury opposite Saturn energy that's still very present through Wednesday into Thursday to really do some deep research and to really use our analysis and our intuition to come to, have an objective approach to power dynamics, right? Because that's what the 8th house is all about, and how we do business and whatever that business is. When we come into, that's Thursday the 3rd, Friday the 4th. So by by Friday, the moon's going to be meeting Neptune. And let's see here. Where are we? The next big transit. Why do I feel like it's not really coming until the 6th, right? So a lot of this full moon period is going to be just the moon transits and the Mercury opposite Saturn, really. And I feel like this might be a blessing. Gosh, I could really use like an energetic break, to be perfectly honest, to really let some things integrate. Oh, the pressure has been immense. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad. It's just a lot. So I feel like the moon conjunct Neptune will probably be a good thing to a certain extent. It may be a little bit of a, fantasy land about things, but at the same time, it really increases your emotional sensitivity. I mean, you can really get confused about things with the moon conjunct Neptune, but thankfully it is retrograde. And so, things will be a little bit more clear about what is delusional fantasy and what is just a connection to transcendence. And you can really be, in terms of what you have and what is yours, Aquarius, in terms of the second house, you can very easily offer emotional comfort and empathy to others and have it be very healing. Like that's like a very best case scenario for Aquarius people right now with this moon conjunct Neptune, because you won't be so caught up in the delusion or the fantasy, and maybe not picking up as many wrong signals. Like you just want to filter it out. But biofield practice is essential when a moon conjuncts Neptune, because also your dream state is going to be highly infiltrated during this time. And it's one of those things where you just got to understand that that's a primary place where, your digital twin is being influenced. So, and if you don't know what that is, that's okay, because we're going to talk about it in another context with the Catalyst Classroom. So, let's see here. It's not really until we get to the 6th where the next really big transit is, which is next weekend. So we get this full week, and then we come in the disseminating moon, right? This is where we're really starting to share the message, kind of emotionally, like feeling like there's something to share, feeling like we've learned something, we want to put it out there. That's a lot of the disseminating moon. And people who have disseminating moons as their natal lunar position as a disseminating moon, they really want to put out there what they've learned. And sometimes they get very frustrated when people don't listen, because they're like, don't you see, I've already come to the revelation, and now I'm here to really reveal and share it with you. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I think that's going to be also a good thing to keep in mind. So the sun, because the sun square Jupiter is like a double-edged sword, right? So the sun is very powerful in Leo. And by the way, look how close we are to the 8-8 gateway. That's happening during this time too. So the sun will come into a square with Jupiter. This is a double-edged sword, because you can get the friction of the square can lead you to feel more proud, more confident, all of those solar energies, right? And lucky and optimistic, right? Because that's also what Jupiter seems to represent, is this fortune and optimism and big picture optimism. But we have to be very careful, especially the sun in Leo. It's very, very powerful, opposite the Aquarius sign. And you can find yourself really wanting to take on more than you can actually accomplish. So it's not that you shouldn't feel these things. You just want to show some moderation and some discipline with the sun square Jupiter, right? And there's a tendency here to overindulge with your spending, especially if we're going to talk about Jupiter in Taurus, right? Expending your resources, overindulging yourself in anything, what you're eating, what you're drinking, how you're spending. But so, and you may want to be generous, and it may be very sensational release of this, of yourself as a way to be very generous. So just don't leave yourself short here. And so like I said, this is a double-edged sword because you just want to be kind of a little bit moderate. And especially as the sun is coming into the Lion's Gate, we can be really dramatic and public about the way that we're releasing this energy. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? This is 15 degrees Leo is like a parade float. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's a public demonstration in a positive way, because again, it really gets people kind of, as an audience or as somebody that is or a group of people receiving the gift of this release of energy, which is the sun in Leo. And the square to Jupiter is more of, I think, just awareness that it's going to be, we have to actually utilize this energy to inspire other people to embrace their own courage to meet some sort of social crisis. And that's the thing about Jupiter at 15 degrees Taurus. This is a man braving a storm, right? The courage needed to meet the crises precipitated by social ambition. So just be aware that the social ambition in and of itself with the sun in Leo, it's just like, yes, releasing so much of my pure passion and fire. You can take on more than, you know what I mean? Biting off more than you can chew. So just be aware of that, Aquarius, because this is, again, about relationships and then also where your power is coming from. You don't want to necessarily, release all of your sense of power and expression into relationship without the awareness that you have to be able to utilize this energy ultimately, to draw on your own personal energy to be able to brave the storm, right? This is going to come back to the beehive cluster, which is really relevant right this moment, because then we come into the Lion's Gate actually on 8/8, which is when not only is when the sun crosses the midpoint of the zodiac sign of Leo, which is around 8/8 usually, right? The sun comes into 16 degrees Leo, and that is considered the Lion's Gate, from combustion into release. It's also the third quarter moon in Taurus. So this whole conversation around where the Aquarius inherent power stems from, where it's drawn from, which is a sense of home and family and personal power and being grounded and rooted in some sort of set of bonds, emotional bonds, right? Family, nation, tribe, clan, spiritual community, whatever it is, it's you and the character that develops as being a part of this. This is a conversation that is continuing to come out for the Aquarius people in this reading. So not only are we at the Lion's Gate on 8/8, but it's also a third quarter moon, which is a crisis in consciousness, right? It's an ideological crisis, right? So I'll talk about the idols already being torn down with the full moon. This is just going to make it very, very personal in terms of the home and family, right? In the place where the power is drawn from and the root system of the Aquarius person. So now before the moon is in a square to the sun, it's going to have these really awesome, it's going to meet Jupiter, and it's going to be in a trine to Virgo. So, and these are starseed markings, by the way, just to let you know, 13, 14, 15 Virgo in particular, and also 18 Virgo are starseed markings. And then same thing in Taurus, 14 degrees Taurus is definitely starseed marking. And then Uranus is going to just brush up against the Pleiades before it stations retrograde. So next year when Uranus finally comes into the Pleiades, I think that's where we're going to see our actual ET, UFO, whatever it is, extravaganza. It's when Uranus hits the Pleiades. It seems like the most obvious time for that to happen. So in the meantime, we have a year to go. So moon in a trine to Mercury allows you to see things more clearly. The moon conjunct Jupiter is good for socializing and optimism and generosity. So there is, and again, the moon in a fourth house, the moon in Taurus, it's very powerful. It's very potent. You are very sensitive to what's going on down here, feeling very optimistic and social and wanting to be in a good mood with your family, your spouse maybe, or within the confines of your private and personal life, to brave the storm. I mean, that's where the braving of the storm is happening here for the Aquarius people, is where they're grounded the most. And so again, this allows Mercury to see things more clearly, to also have a very enhanced intuitive sense that can be applied to the rational thought process in these dark areas, of course. And then the conjunction with Jupiter, like I said, is like, it just gives you a sense of optimism and generosity and a really good mood at home, right? Which is, again, going to influence the way that the mind is working in those dark spaces about power dynamics. I think that's really favorable, because right after that is when the Leo, the actual Lionsgate sun, is in a square, as you can see. And Jupiter's still in the square with the sun. Like, that hasn't just magically gone away. We got a couple days until that influence is gone, which is that double-edged sword. So this square with this Taurus moon is going to be like, well, you can't rely basically on anything that's come before. And that's really difficult when you're talking about where you are emotionally rooted, where you are intuitively rooted, where the core of your being has been identified for you. When you have this deep sense, like, I have to go beyond this. I have to go beyond what has been already rooted and established here. While you are passing through, and at the same time literally passing through the Lion's Gate, right? And there's this surge of life and love after some sort of major crisis, but you know that you can't go back to the old root system. It's inadequate. It doesn't provide you with the knowledge that will be necessary in terms of crisis. And so we're going to be like walking through this gateway in terms of who we are and who we've been in relationship and how we express ourselves in relationship as Aquarius people, but also too this deep, very, very sensitive, very embedded sense, very intuitive sense of there's no going back, right? It's like going through the eye of the needle, right? There's no going back. And I think that that's going to be very difficult to be that sensitive too. And this is very, the sun in Leo going through the Lion's Gate is just like, you're getting the surge from your heart. This is, again, you have Jupiter and Uranus here. So I think, again, it can be very, that optimism with Jupiter, I'm getting a really strong, just like, take advantage of this, right? Feeling in a good mood, being optimistic and generous with the people at home and the people that you're the most committed to. I think that's gonna bode well, and in order to really be that Aquarius person that can interface with the whole network and how it's gonna be, how it's gonna turn out, like where the real power of human civilization comes from. And of course, there is a trine to Mars. This day seems really important. I mean, it is the 8/8 Lionsgate, which is a week out from the full moon. So it's the third quarter moon. We have the Lionsgate, and it's in a square to a Taurus moon, and then we have this trine to Mars, which again gives you courage and initiative and intuitively know what to do. There will be an airing out of emotionally, an airing out or a cleansing of our own consciousness in relation to whatever this is, and Mars ready to go deeper into the unconscious, right? And to connect in. So just don't use the Ouija board to do it. It's very tempting to do so, but I would say to stay away from those types of things and let your connection to divine source be the only medium that you really need to contact a deeper aspect of your own unconscious psyche, to get into the depths of your own participation in business or power dynamics, right? And for those who, don't even, well, I'm not even going to say that here. Okay. So the moon trine Mars, this is also a really great transit of initiating and being intuitive, being direct and assertive, especially with Mars in your 8th house. Definitely an increased charisma and sex appeal with Mars in the 8th house like this, and then the moon in a trine makes you more popular in social situations, makes you a good leader and have good leadership qualities, a positive attitude, and it's going to allow for a deeper contact into those areas for the sake of for healing and transparency and real power, not this fake cult power. So because the real power is about the relationship with God and not manipulating or exploiting what's here just to get what you want because you made bad decisions in the past. So when the moon comes into conjunction with our ruling planet of Uranus, right, sudden events, subconscious impulses, right, flashes of insight should be taken very seriously when this happens. So I feel like the 8/8 day is going to be a big one for us, well, for everyone, but for the Aquarius people and the Leo people, obviously, considering that it's in their sign. Now, the square to Venus is going to be pretty interesting. Let's see, let's go look at that. Yeah, the 8th is really shaping up to be something else, huh? I try not to impose too much onto my preparation so that I can really just be as surprised as you are as we go through it. So the square to Venus, usually you feel kind of, you are wanting to engage, you need pleasure, right? That's what Venus is really good at, and especially in Leo, right? The pleasure comes from people focusing on her. So you want more through affection, right? And sometimes you can be very self-indulgent and moody because you feel this increased need for this affection and pleasure through this affection and this attention. So, and with the moon in a conjunction still with this degree of Taurus, 24 Taurus, I mean, there's going to be like this animal nature, that kind of this commanding presence that's going to come out emotionally. And Venus is like, you know what? I'm just staying very focused, a total concentration. This is 24 Leo is the degree of like ADD. There's no hyperactivity. There's just extreme focus. Like people who can play video games for, 8 to 12 hours in a stretch, or people who just have that level of extreme focus on whatever they're doing. There's something that you have to make an extra effort to be giving as much as receiving in a transit like this as well. And unsatisfying relationships can suffer from disrespect or a sense of disloyalty. And I would say that don't let the moon in this moment do anything but embolden you to continue to concentrate on that which is the most valuable, important in terms of relationship, because otherwise you can find yourself being very careless at this time with this moon square Venus. So you don't want to be careless with those whom you love and you do respect, and that they are part of your experiences of love and affection. We don't want to be careless and moody with those people, especially because Venus is in the 7th house of relationship, and the moon in the 4th house is definitely still us in our feels, right? And so we could be feeling very just like commanding and fierce in a very instinctual way, commanding. But at the same time, we need to be very, I think, internally focused on the balance of the relationship and being sensitive to really feeling that balance, okay? So, that is something else. That the 9th. Now, Venus is going to square Uranus right after this. So just talk about the need for real focus, because that's going to be one of those experiences that is going to challenge that type of focus when Uranus and Venus come into that particular square. So it's already done it once, and now it's going to do it again when Venus stations direct. But I think at that point, Uranus will be retrograde at that point. So we'll see how that shakes out. But in the meantime, again, it can really challenge the stability of relationships through unexpected events when you have Venus in a square to Uranus. So, oops. Come back, notes. Yes. And along with that, Mercury is going to trine Jupiter. So that's also going to keep things very open-minded, and communication channels are going to be, it's going to be good to clean things up, being open-minded so you can increase your general knowledge. Best transit for making plans, Mercury trine Jupiter. So, perhaps it's not as shocking when the Venus square Uranus. It could be, you feel this increased need for freedom. It can test your patience. You may lash out in anger. I also feel like that based on Uranus being in Taurus, Venus rules the sign of Taurus. I also get the sense, too, that there is a need to really persevere in order to continue to hold the energy of passion and optimism and joy in your relationships. And maybe something does need to change, and maybe it'll change through an unexpected event. And if anything, the challenge to the stability with the Venus retrograde is going to be like, yeah, that's right. This relationship can stand the test of whatever types of unexpected events happen. And I think that's a really good thing. And then on top of that, with Mercury in a trine to Jupiter happening right after this, basically on the 9th, which is next Wednesday, you're gonna, like I said, it's an ideal time to clean things up. And we're talking about how, again, the place where you're rooted and grounded, and the courage needed to meet any of those crises in these areas. And Mercury, there's like a gracefulness here of your ability to make plans, to receive or give good news, right? Business dealings, especially in the 8th house, can go very well in this particular place. And I think a lot of that has to do with just maintaining a sense of balance and peace in your relationships, even if it means you kind of have to pull in a little bit of your own stuff. I think that's really very beneficial to be happening. Then the moon's at this time, the moon is gonna be basically moving through the Pleiades, or moving in conjunction with the Pleiades while that's happening. So when the moon comes into Gemini, it's going to pretty much transit all of Gemini before it comes into Cancer, and then the sun will be in a trine to Chiron. This is a nice transit. I think that now that we've walked through the Lion's Gate, and and yes, Chiron is retrograde as well, but when the sun is in a trine to Chiron, or even a sextile, this is a chance to shine, because we're kind of projecting ourselves with self-respect and modesty, while also kind of being out and about and being really charming. All you have to do is just kind of be yourself, and I feel like this is going to be very healing. There's going to be opportunities to heal, especially with Chiron in the 3rd house, in terms of maybe, self-thought, the way that we talk to ourselves or other people, the nature of our mental functions, our ability to assess our environment. These are all 3rd house energies. And the 3rd house is where the Aquarius person is like, just themselves. They are just in the seed of all their potential is in the mind and the immediate awareness. It's the assessment process, right? So I think that just by being yourself and really kind of returning back to the value of the heart and what it means physically, what it means energetically, and just being yourself in your relationships, I think is going to go a long way into providing opportunities to heal what's right around you, or to be healed by the pressure or the woundedness or the victim mentality that has to do with your speech, how you think about yourself, your own neural pathways. And the 3rd house is the assessment. It's the perception of what you are feeling. So that space from the 2nd And third house is the areas where we are most influenced by neuromodulation, for instance, right? What we sense and how we perceive it can easily be hijacked, and it is, right? It's hacked. And so I think the Aquarius people with Chiron in the third house has really been the place of, like, you know, how to heal ourselves from our own suffering in this area so that we can really return to wholeness, right? Rather than being fractured by our trauma and keeping that wound open, because we feel this need, to, continue to re-traumatize ourselves so we can help and teach and heal other people. And ultimately, at the end of it, Chiron's hybridization didn't save his ass. So all Aquarius people really need to come to terms with this. But I do get the sense that this Sun trine Chiron is going to present a real strong opportunity through healing, through relationship. Absolutely. And at least Chiron is retrograde. I feel like that's also a possibility where, the intensity of it is kind of pulling in and internalized a little bit. And we have this opportunity to be like, okay, like, where am I really fulfilling, where am I acting out in my immediate environment, how I think, how I think about myself, right? Those karmic neural trenches or neural pathways of the way self-talk, for instance, or how we interact, what our perception is. That's a big perception, goes a long way. And so you can see how effective it is to hijack or hack in that space of sensory to perception, right? It's the baseline of the nervous system is sensory and perception. That's what happens. You sense things through your nervous system. The signals go to your brain, and it has this whole, experience there in the brain that comes into perception. So the fact that we're hacked at that level, the Aquarius people really need to get on it in terms of, what is it that's motivating a lot of these patterns, or what is influencing these patterns that is reinforcing and keeping that wound open, because that's what Chiron represents. And I have to say that Chiron work is essential for a starseed, regardless if it's a starseed marking in your natal chart or not. Learning how to work with Chiron, understanding the hybridization of Chiron and what it means is essential, because if you don't, this is one of the buttons that gets pushed the most for starseeds, in my opinion, and based on what I've seen and what I have myself experienced so directly that I'm not going to share here. Now, the moon does move into Cancer on the 13th, and which is the 6th house. So remember, and this is where Venus comes into a conjunction with the sun. Now, this is going to be distressing, because the degree that this conjunction is happening is is like chickens flapping their wings trying to fly, because they can't. Right? But they're trying anyway. And it's one of those, it really represents what happens when your Kundalini activates without any type of, without the proper circuitry in order to do it. So it distresses the soul, especially when you're seeking stimulation from elements that are essentially alien to its own nature. So here's the thing. Aquarius people are going to understand this, because their capacity to interface with that stimulation that is quote unquote alien. And when I say alien, it's not within your own soul, right? When you're reaching out and having the experience of the full network of humanity, that in itself is away from the individual soul. And so sometimes you have a premature expansion of that consciousness, and anybody who has ever had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening knows that looks like madness. It looks like a psychotic break, right? Chickens flapping their wings trying to fly. But it also represents the capacity for creative self-mobilization that enables people to rise to the needs of every possible situation. So when you can harness this energy properly because you have created a vessel, let me think here about the new moon in Cancer, how we create a vessel that then allows the Pentecostal fire to enter into our lives, right? Venus conjunct the sun. Now, again, Venus is retrograde, so she's pulling in quite a bit here, but she's meeting the sun. And so there's an expression of full love and affection here and creativity in terms of relationship, Aquarius. And there's very beautiful feelings. There's very radiant feelings with, now Venus may be a little understated because she is in her retrograde. She may be feeling, how do I say this? Modest. That's the word. Venus retrograde in Leo. She's feeling a little modest and acting, modest, which I think is not a terrible thing. But the sun is going to be like, hey, it's okay. You can socialize. You can be with people. This is a good time financially. But something to keep in mind here is that radiant feeling that's coming off of you may inevitably distress other people because it is so radiant. So there's the retrograde, again, I feel like is a little bit of modesty here in terms of who you are in relationship. You also don't want to be too much. You yourself don't want to be activated by your relationships to the point where you are distressed. Just remember the best case scenario for this degree is that it represents a capacity for creative self-mobilization. So it might be distressing and difficult at that moment, but you're learning something about who you are in relationship, and you can feel a sense of love and affection and maybe radiate that to other people as well. I like this. I like this Venus conjunct the sun very much. I'm glad that Venus is retrograde because she is more modest right now. And the moon will be in Cancer, right? So it is basically passing over the last new moon because it's in its balsamic phase now. Venus will also trine Chiron, so there'll be another very healing moment here with Venus trine Chiron. And then we come to the balsamic moon, which is on the 15th. The moon is in Leo, and look, the sun is going to square Uranus. And so talk about more unexpected events in terms of home, family, and the way it influences the way that it influences you in your relationships, who you are in relationship, how you express yourself, how you're sustained by your relationships. This type of transit requires open-mindedness and flexibility because there's a stage of uncertainty that's coming here, and there's a very strong feeling of impending change and abruptness and rapid changes in that environment. And it's most likely going to be environments that have to do with, the places where you feel safest, home, family, your marriage, the place where you're committed. So it could also be at the extension of, especially because the U.S. natal chart is an Aquarius moon, right? So this is also going to go right into the whole experience of the United States. Ego conflicts are possible without safe and conscious release of impulsive and rebellious energy. And where is that energy most likely going to come from? Well, it's going to come from where you and your power comes from, Aquarius. It's going to come through you and your relationship, whatever those social relationship, personal relationship, business relationship. You have to be proactive about positive change in order not to have this totally knock you on your ass before the next new moon, which is a Leo new moon. And let's see, what degree is it at? I think it's at the same degree that the square to Uranus, which means the new moon is going to be in a square to Uranus. Oh, of course. Okay, well... You bet, the total concentration, no matter what the hell's going on outside of you, is going to be the next theme moving from August into September, which seems very fitting considering everything that's going to be, distraction and, Joe Biden's going to, I've asserted this for a very long time that Joe Biden is definitely the wicker man. And we're getting real close to that. And so this next new moon in Leo is going to still affect the Aquarius people because it's going to be all about who you are in relationship, that you need to be able to concentrate so much that you are not disturbed whatsoever outside of yourself. It's like those sadhus in India where they are, those holy men that are in meditation 20 hours a day or whatever, and their hair is all matted and dreaded, and their fingernails are really long, and they're dirty, right? Because they are so fully concentrated on what they are singularly doing from their heart, which is being in communion with God, that everything else goes unkept, right? And so that new moon is going to it's going to be interesting considering that the real change here and also the real optimism and fortune and understanding is still in the fourth house of your root system. So, oh man, August and September. Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be clearly that, and it's, you can see here that it's also conjunct Black Moon Lilith as well in Leo. So this next new moon for us Aquarius people, the shit show continues for all of us, but for the Aquarius people, this full moon is really important so that we know exactly what we're focusing on in terms of that relationship contract and not be disturbed by anything else. So, yeah, that's why I'm going to leave it there for you guys. So thank you. So, oh no, I'm so sorry. Two things I want to talk about. I hate bringing stuff up that I want to talk about and then I never get to it. So, which is really fitting actually for what I'm going to share with you just really, really briefly is the birth chart of Alex Jones, because he does this all the time. He gets into and the reason I'm sharing it with you is because he is a Sun Aquarius. He doesn't have a lick of Leo in his natal chart. Now, his birth time is not known publicly, so it's very difficult to get a sense of what his house system is and where Leo actually is. So I'm sure if we got an idea of what house Leo was for him, it would make a lot of sense. But so just know that he's not we don't know that he's an Aries rising, but his moon is, how much you want to bet his moon actually is conjunct Arcturus? Like his moon is either in Libra or very early Scorpio based on the day and the date and location. I would not be surprised at all if his moon was conjunct Arcturus, right? So he has Sun conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius, right? These are Orion starseed markings. In particular, his natal Jupiter is in a square to the Pleiades as well. But when you have, now consider that what I just talked about with the Sun in Aquarius being at its detriment, but he has Jupiter here. He has Jupiter in Aquarius as well that is supporting us. So this is just because I wanted to bring up an actual Aquarius Sun person in the public eye, and he is infamous for having like all of these things. You know, if he has an interview or something, then it keeps him on task. But as soon as it's just him, you know what I mean? Like however the spirit moves him he is sustained by his connection to the social consciousness as a whole, and he has Jupiter right there. So when you have Jupiter, conjunct the Sun in your natal chart, your interest is in expanding not only your perspective of what is possible, but you end up being a visionary. And you are compelled towards understanding the big picture of life. And Aquarius people tend to be very visionary because they're able to expand their own consciousness and their own vitality into the network as a whole, right? So you can see how so easily Aquarius people can get pulled into the Borg. And so this type of person enjoys embarking on adventures into new terrain, becoming exposed to a wide range of cultural and philosophical viewpoints that broaden your understanding. Now, again, he's in Aquarius and enlarges your knowledge. You strive to be an inspirational presence for others. And, it's so funny. And you enjoy uplifting, encouraging others. You may be drawn to be a teacher and shares knowledge. And you'll need to moderate a tendency towards excess and optimistically taking on more than you're able to realistically manage. And that's what Jupiter does. Jupiter is a supreme manager. And, it's all for the sake of humanity for this person. But he also is very deeply, deeply embedded. And he's kind of stuck in some ways in where he is, but he's also very committed to what he's doing. Capacity to believe in a greater potential needs to be balanced with diligent attention to doing all of the work necessary to successfully manifest the vision. And I would say that he does a really good job with that personally. The fact that he has no Leo, I find really interesting. I really wish I could know what his what Leo house is for him, because I think that would really shine a light on certain things. But here is an Aquarius Sun conjunct Jupiter with a moon in most likely conjunct Arcturus in Libra, that would be an exact trine that is also in a trine to his natal Saturn, which is down here in the last degrees of Gemini, right? Opposite the galactic center. In fact, that is where his north node is. It's conjunct the galactic center. And oh, would you look at that? He has Neptune conjunct Antares. So, I mean, safe to say that Alex Jones has starseed markings, and you can see how he's ended up in the position he is, but he's also, I would say the thing is, talk about so easily getting pulled into the network, even though there's this sense of personal identification with humanity. This degree of his sun is a big bear sitting down and it's about like actual discipline of the animal nature. And the King of Forces just the other day was like, Alex Jones sounds like the cross between this like gruff bear and a pig. And he did this amazing impression just off the cuff, because that's King of Forces. He's just amazing like that. And it sounded just like him. And I was just like, yeah. And then I looked at his Aquarius rise, his sun sign, and the Sabian symbol for 23 degrees of Aquarius, which truly is about being very disciplined. But the bear thing is what got me, because he said that before I even looked at this chart. And I was like, well, there's the bear right there, but he's a big bear sitting down and waving all his paws. And I know if you've ever watched Alex Jones or listened to him at all, you don't have to like him. You can just listen to it with just a critical, critical analysis, right? I really also encourage people not to necessarily not listen to things because someone else has said that it's not worth it, right? You should always assert yourself and do your own critical analysis and actually come to that conclusion because you've listened to it, not because it is someone else's opinion that it's not worth listening to, because that's how, all of these operations function, is convincing you that you actually feel or think that. And again, there's that hacking of the second and third house. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting about 23 degrees Aquarius. And then his Jupiter is 25 degrees Aquarius, which is a butterfly with the right wing more perfectly formed. The capacity to develop the rational and fully conscious aspect of the mind ahead of normal evolution. So, I mean, I was looking at a chart of a person like this and saw this grand air trine with their Saturn and their south node that is in full transparency. I mean, Saturn is retrograde, but is, very, especially a south node, right? Completely in that rational mind, conjunct Betelgeuse, right? Like you have tons of that Orion nature with a moon and Uranus conjunct Arcturus over here. I mean, I think the fact that he doesn't have any Leo is one of his biggest detriments, because he's, he is very committed to what he's doing, but at the same time, there's nothing anchoring his heart fire necessarily unless anything transits through Leo. The good thing is, though, and for those of you who know what I'm talking about with the Beehive cluster, which is where we're going to go to next, he doesn't have that either. He has his Neptune conjunct Antares, and he has the North Node conjunct the galactic center, and his Chiron, he's having a Chiron return, or just did have a Chiron return, and many people are having a Chiron return right now that have their Chiron in Aries, including the United States. So, and he has Mercury in Pisces, right? So he also, especially 11 degrees of Pisces, this is about the eye of the needle, right? So say what you want about Alex Jones, but his chart is pretty amazing. And I think that honestly his pitfall is that he doesn't have any Leo to balance out his Aquarius, and his sun, the ruler of Leo, is in Aquarius. I would really love to know what his house system is. I think that would really shed some light on things, and to get his exact moon degree, because that also could shed a lot of light on some things. Anyway, so everything that I just talked about with Aquarius, with the full moon, right? He's definitely going to be feeling it just like the rest of us. So I'm curious to see how his show, even in the next 2 weeks, is going to, the tone of it, right? What it's going to entail. So, and the last thing I want to talk about today, my friends, is the Beehive cluster, because this is something really important to understand, especially, again, not only just being a starseed, but also if you have this in your natal chart somewhere. So for me, this is my draconic ascendant, is the Beehive cluster, and it is a cluster of these stars that are actually in the head of the Cancer constellation. Okay, so in ancient astrology, like if you follow astrologyking.com, and he talks about more of the Chinese astrology, more of the Arabian astrology, more of the Ptolemaic astrology that is more sidereal, right? Is focusing on the constellations and the positions of the actual fixed stars, whereas Western astrology is more mathematical because it is a geometrically based system. Based on a 360-degree circumference with the person at the center and how everything is distributed around us. So, but Astrology King focuses on the particular stars and the constellations and their symbolic references. And one of the things that's very consistent in the explanation of the Beehive cluster is that it was always a bad omen. Always, right? Which is so interesting when you think about the beehive, right? The other name is the manger or the stable, and astronomical designation of this cluster is M44, right? So 4 being, the square, the symbol that represents that materiality in many ways, the box, and then 44 being the 8, right? The infinite loop here. Hadoop loop. Whoever's listening that understands, there's a big connection to that and this beehive cluster. Okay, so I didn't even put the Hadoop loop, and that was just about the loop of the infinity symbol. Jeez, there's so much firing off right now. And like I said, it was very personal to me. So this particular forecast. So it is the nature of Mars and the Moon, according to like Ptolemaic and more ancient fixed star astrology. And it, like I said, there's not a lot of good omens attached to the beehive cluster or the manger, right? And so we're looking at 7 degrees of Leo with an orb of 1 degree on either side. And so it makes its native. So if you have this in your chart, especially if you are an Aquarius person and you have this somewhere, or you have this as like your sun is conjunct, like your solar return is happening right now, for instance, there's a lot of fortune connected to this, but there's also, though you're liable to loss through others, but it also has like this sense of cooperation and ability to really work together as a team. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing about the beehive, right? Or the manger. But it also has this kind of thing about this is where it's all kind of confined or penned in. And it is the... as you can see here, it's the head of the crab, right? Cancer, as a constellation, the crab, right? This is the hard shell that protects the insides. And the crab has got pinchers, right? It's got an exoskeleton. It's got pinchers. We've all seen how many sci-fi movies that have this huge exoskeleton with these arms. I mean, Avatar is one of the ones I'm thinking about that have the claws or some sort of large appendage that can like squeeze, right? I'm sure, Transformers, whatever. Right, the Alien movies, I think that they brought, even in the first one, I think that was like how Sigourney Weaver's character was able to actually fight the alien. Anyway, the beehive cluster is the head, right? It is the actual digital, it's the computer. It's the network of how the decisions are made of this whole body that moves around and is protecting but also interacting with the world, right? Very, very interesting. So this beehive cluster, or the manger, it also says it threatens mischief and blindness and is said to cause disease and disgrace. So there's a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different footnotes, that talk about different people over time have attributed certain attributes to this beehive cluster, M44. And in Chinese astrology, this group of stars was called the spirit of the ancestors. And I also have heard other astrologers talk about this in terms of like the root of humanity. So there is something that it's not all artificial, obviously, when we think about a network or a hive, right? It's just that this cluster seems to have a very deep and ancient connection to the consciousness or the heart of humanity somehow. But every time it gets involved, there is a bad omen as well that seems to go along with it. So you can look more up about the beehive cluster, M44, do your research, but it also rules the right eye. Do you remember what rules the left eye? It was Procyon, which was the degree of the new moon. So they're, right now, especially with the sun conjunct this beehive cluster, like it is that those two aspects of vision are coming together right now. And so the busy beehive, the atmosphere presents like this idea of being able to work together and have like a home base, right? Now imagine if there was some sort of computer system that was like your consciousness home base. Wow. There's another layer of the hive. But the inclusion of the lunar quality, which is from the Cancer constellation, emphasizes kind of a moody and unpredictable quality here. So someone else who has the beehive cluster very prominent in their natal chart in history is Aleister Crowley. It was his ascendant, right? And it's also my ascendant in my draconic chart. So that connection has not been lost on me. So people with these stars strong in their horoscopes, and if they're favorably aspected, right? Like if you have something here and it has favorable aspects to other places, it shows a capacity for cooperation with others, a secret of much of their success in life, which is that cooperation, and it's stable, as in like stable home, right? So there's something very positive about it, but there's also something very disgraceful. There's something that is a bad omen that is connected to this star cluster as well. And so the fact that the sun is right here, right now as I'm recording this, and the sheer volume of starseeds that I see, including myself, that have this prominent in their chart somehow, either in a draconic or a progressed way. It's in their natal chart. It is in a trine or a sextile to this place, and from any of these charts. It's important to be very aware of this, because this is a specific type of hive that functions like a computer network, and you have to be, as an Aquarius person, you have to be aware of this and how it influences you, because that might be very much what you yourself are tapping into, thinking that you're getting some sort of download, right? This is why this is really dangerous, and how absolutely essential it is that you know the voice of your creator, and you have put it through all of the tests of validation, that you've learned from every mistake that you've ever made in your judgment. And I'm saying this truly from myself, so that you understand that this is not just me projecting onto everyone else like I somehow know better. I make mistakes all the time, and you have to learn from them. But for the Aquarius people, if you're not, and you have this somewhere in your chart, if you are not aware of it, you have to be, because this is the place where, like I said, you think you're getting some sort of like celestial download, and you're really just getting it from a satellite. And I hate to say it, because I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but I had to go through it too. And the minute I started to realize what the hell was happening here, I was just like, this is not a celestial download. This is literally a satellite beaming this thought into my head, because it's going to encourage someone else's plan, unfolding, right? So Aquarius people, we have a huge responsibility to be what? To be grounded. And Uranus, as much of as a pain in the ass, at least we, as that, being ruled by that planet, we are capable of the shifting and the rapid change and the rebellion and the freedom that goes along with Uranus, because what it does is give us the quantum experience to be able to interface with something more than just ourselves. But if we don't know who we are, we don't know what is truly in our hearts, if we have not established that some sort of benevolent force in our lives is our talisman, like I did. The last time I was basically, how do I put this? Offered my sling ring, if you know what I mean. Last time that happened, which is always happening on the back plane, right? Is always happening in that digital space when you're dreaming. Last time that happened, I was just like, nope, I don't need that. I got Jesus, right? And it doesn't mean that's just me and other people, of course, whatever that means to you is what is valuable and important. But we have to be honest with ourselves, because if we're not, then we just get pulled into the hive and not even aware that that's where we are. And I really don't think that anybody that's listening to this truly wants to be part of that transhumanist agenda. So it's very sophisticated. It's been in action and planned for a really long time. And it's very naive to think that we're somehow just like immune to it just because, right? We got to be honest with ourselves. So Aquarius, I know that you have the capacity to really think outside of the box on these issues. So please know your heart. And be willing to be honest with yourself, and maybe a little more modest with Venus in her retrograde. Like really, really be sensitive to the most subtle dynamics in your relationships, so that you know what is true and what is truly balanced, so that you can be much more effective as an Aquarius person. Right, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. It's essential that we are in. We tighten it up. And we know exactly who we are and what type of human society that we are part of, or working to be part of. So Aquarius, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. I would love to offer you a lunar transit forecast. I want to be completely transparent that I'm not sure that I would have the time to get it out to you before the full moon. But if you would like a lunar transit forecast looking towards the next new moon, a 30-minute or 60-minute reading is available to you. Go to a website listed in the description box below. Go to the bookings tab, look for lunar transit forecast sale, and there are 30 and 60-minute options, and we can look for any time period you want to look at in terms of the lunar transit forecast, 30-minute or 60-minute, just depends on how in depth you want to get. So that's available to the Aquarius Sun, Moon, and Rising people. If you are part of the Starseed Fellowship and you have a monthly subscription, then that particular sale rate is open to you anytime with any sign, and that's something that you can book if you're interested in what this full moon and certainly what this next new moon is going to have in store. So with that all being said, thank you, Aquarius. I appreciate you so very much. And everyone else, I do appreciate everything. Don't forget to subscribe and like, because it definitely helps these messages get out to a larger audience. Because if you find it helpful and valuable, chances are someone else is going to find it helpful and valuable as well. And that's what I'm here to do. Is to be that nurturing kind of Cancer person in terms of my service to the world. So take care of yourselves, Aquarius, and for everyone else too. I'll see you on the flip side. Bye.